They say Camilla wrapped her husband's failing hand around a pen and made him sign. A man too weak to read the page, a man who did not know what it would do, a man who could not say no. And honestly, if even half of this story is true, it is the coldest thing anyone has accused her of in 20 years. Now stay with me. Because 2 days after that signature, a red leather folder went quiet. It did not vanish on its own. Someone took it, and by the time it surfaced again, it was burning in a fireplace while her family was driven away from the palace in ordinary taxis. We will get to that fireplace, but first remember one line, because it is the whole story. A signature is not a crown. If you are new here, we are Crown Watch. We follow these palace stories as they unfold, so go ahead and subscribe, and you will never miss the next turn. For most people now, Camilla is simply the queen. For the women who lived through the 80s, she is something else. She is the third person in a marriage. You did not read that in a history book. You watched it happen week by week in the papers on your kitchen table. Diana died in August of 1997. For 28 years, one quiet question has sat under everything this family does. Was she wronged? Most of you answered that a long time ago, and every time Camilla rises a little higher, that old wound opens a little wider. If you watch that grey morning in September of 1997, you remember a 15-year-old boy walking behind his mother's coffin, head down, eyes on the pavement. The whole world was weeping and he was not allowed to. Honestly, that boy is the reason this entire story exists. Here is what reportedly happened inside Clarence's house. Camilla had spent months on one document, a red leather dossier, according to the people telling this, not a letter, a formal proposal asking for titles, privileges, and a permanent seat at royal ceremonies for her own children and grandchildren, people with no royal blood at all. And the claim is that she waited. She waited until Charles was unwell and isolated, cut off from anyone who might ask questions. Then she came to his room with the folder and a fountain pen. The story says she guided his hand across the page herself, held his fingers, moved the pen for him. Now look, none of this has been confirmed by the palace, and we cannot say it happened exactly this way, but here is what we can say. An honest request does not happen in a quiet room at night. It happens with lawyers, with witnesses in daylight. The secrecy is the tell, and the secrecy is what gave William everything he needed. Now here is where this stops being a family quarrel and starts becoming palace warfare. William is not the boy from that funeral anymore. He is patient in a way that frightens people. He does not shout, he does not write a statement, he waits, and for years, those close to him say he's been quietly counting who in this family treats Diana's memory as something to be sold. So when word reached him that the Parker Bowles family was suddenly being walked through restricted rooms at Windsor, he did not storm down the corridor. He watched from a floor above. A loud son would have handed Camilla her victory. She could have run to Charles and cried that the boy was cruel to her. William understood that game perfectly, so he stepped back into the shadows and made one phone call instead. He called his aunt, and honestly, if you know this family, you knew it would be Anne. Anne dated Andrew Parker Bowles long before he married Camilla. That is not gossip. That is public record. 50 years later, the woman Camilla's husband once courted would be the first call William made. Anne has always chosen the institution over her own comfort. She does duty, not drama. She was the perfect ally for a quiet war. They met past midnight in the archive room beneath the palace. And this is where a law book from 1772 enters the story. The Royal Marriages Act was real, passed in the reign of George III, to give the monarch control over who his relatives could marry. It stayed on the books until 2013. So the law is genuine, even if its use here is a stretch. Their argument was simple. Charles had signed, but Charles signed while unwell, with no witnesses, and without the consent of the heir. Under what they called the heir's consent clause, that signature carried no weight at all. Was that really how the act worked? Probably not in a courtroom, but inside palace walls, the word of the heir apparent is close to absolute, and a half-aware king could not overrule it. We cannot verify that this midnight meeting happened the way it is told, but what is documented is this. Camilla had a piece of paper. William had the name on the building. She had the signature. He had the name. And one of those things outlasts the other every single time. Now, hold on, because this next part is where it stops being talk and becomes an operation. They began keeping what insiders call the quiet ledger. A senior household figure, said to be a deputy comptroller named Sir Adrian Cole, logged every key Camilla borrowed and every name she sent to the office. Guards from the Welsh regiment tracked who entered her rooms. They were watching for one thing above all: the gala passes. Those passes are the heart of this. Small gold cards, each with its own code, the only way through the gates of a major royal ceremony. Camilla had submitted a list. Her children, her grandchildren. She was already choosing their jewellery. She thought the red folder was her trump card. She never saw the trap close, because when her list reached the management office, Anne was already standing there with the law book against her chest. She pulled every pass bearing the Parker Bowles name and locked them in an iron box. She ordered the guest list tightened to direct blood and recognised nobility only. Meanwhile, William was at the ceremony platform itself, changing the codes on the gates, removing the seats meant for her family, replacing them with flowers and a place for diplomats. The passes were gone. The seats were gone. The codes were changed, and Camilla was still walking the halls in her blue gown, telling her grandchildren to hold their heads high with no idea that every door had already shut. Now look, we cannot say each of these steps unfolded exactly on schedule, but the shape of it is unmistakable. This was not anger, this was planning, and the day of the ceremony arrived with Camilla certain she had already won. She led her family toward the golden archway. The red folder was in her clutch, ready to be raised like a weapon. At 11 minutes past noon, 4 guards from William's regiment stepped forward and crossed their ceremonial swords. The captain told her, in front of the gathered nobility, that her companions were not on the list and could not pass. The whispering started at once. Her face went from flush to white. She lifted the red folder over her head and shouted that this was an order signed by the king. That was when Anne stepped out from behind the arch. She did not raise her voice. She held the law book to her chest, looked at the folder for a long moment and said 5 words. Blood is not for sale. Honestly, that is the moment people will be repeating for weeks. Camilla turned, demanding, and got nothing. She turned to the only person left who could save her, and here the story does the thing nobody expects. Charles had just been brought in, looking tired and far away. She reached for his hand. She begged him to tell his son to stand down, to say he had signed it, to say he had promised. Everyone in that hall waited for the king to defend his wife. He said nothing. He looked at William. Then he slowly drew his hand out of hers, closed his eyes, and gestured for his chair to be turned. He gave her his back in front of everyone. And in that silence, Charles chose the bloodline over the woman beside him. She came holding paper. She left holding nothing. A pen had given it to her, and a law book took it away. Whether he understood what he had once signed, or simply no longer had the strength to fight for it, the result was the same. Her family was walked back down the corridor. The grandchildren who had been so bold days earlier now covered their faces as the world watched them leave. They were put into ordinary taxis William had arranged and driven away, and the red folder. Someone picked it up from where it had fallen, carried it to the fireplace and dropped it in. The flames took the jagged signature and the whole quiet ambition with it. The aftermath was total. Her children and grandchildren were barred from royal residences. Their names scrubbed from every future list. The cars, the holiday homes, the small privileges she had been handing out, all taken back. And Camilla herself now moves through an isolated wing of Clarence House, watched by William's guards, permitted only to see her husband through glass. So here is what I keep coming back to. The palace sells you unity, continuity, a happy family on a balcony. The reality, if any of this is true, is surveillance, a midnight law book, and a son who waited 28 years to close a door. A signature is not a crown. Camilla forgot that. William never did. Tell me in the comments. Where were you when you heard the news in August of 1997?